primary elections in several states. New York City delays when a tax is due. States joining the school choice scholarship program, and a lawsuit over food subsidies for non-citizens. Welcome to the States, powered by the Center Square. It's Tuesday, August 4th, 2026, and I'm your host, Greg Bishop. Well, voters headed to the polls in 5 state primaries today to pick candidates that they want to go on to the general midterm election in November. You've got primary elections taking place in Kansas, Missouri, Michigan, Washington, and Virginia. Now, in Washington, one of the most hotly contested congressional elections that could determine the control of Congress is that of the state's 3rd district. Incumbent Democratic U.S. Representative Marie Gluskamp Perez is seeking a 3rd term in that battleground congressional district. She faces off against Republican Washington Senator John Braun, Democrat Brent Henrich, and 6 other candidates. Now, 10 candidates in eastern Washington are challenging Representative Michael Baumgartner in Washington's easternmost congressional district. Baumgartner, who's seeking his 2nd term in Washington's 5th district, is facing a challenge from 6 Democratic candidates and 4 independent candidates. The freshman member of Congress introduced the Power of Water Families Act of 2026, and that's legislation that could require AI data centers to pay the full cost of power and water infrastructure needed to service them. In Virginia, Republicans there are set to choose who will take on Democrat U.S. Senator Mark Warner in the fall. Retired Army Major General Burt Mizawa, certified public accountant and former federal financial executive Kim Farrington, and David Williams, a combat veteran, former CIA case officer, and former State Department diplomat who continues to serve as lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps Reserve. They're all seeking that Republican nomination. Meanwhile, Democrats are eyeing Virginia as a battleground to flip the U.S. House. In Missouri today, voters are going to take up a ballot measure that could give some Illinois residents in the Metro East area a reason to move across the Mississippi if the Missouri measure passes. The measure, which will be present on the ballots today, it proposes an amendment to the Missouri Constitution that could phase out the income tax entirely. According to polling by YouGov and St. Louis University back in February, the ballot measure could just narrowly pass if the electorate votes along the lines of the findings. 52% of voters in the state would prefer the Missouri state government rely on sales taxes over individual income taxes. And then in Michigan, the Democratic Senate primary between Haley Stevens and Abdul al-Sayed, it's evolved into one of the nation's most significant ideological showdowns. And that party primary is raising fundamental questions about the future of the Democratic Party and what role the government plays in solving some of the affordability crises facing American families. Now, joining us to discuss the primary in Michigan is Michigan State Director for Americans for Prosperity, Tim Golding. Tim, thanks for taking time. As we just laid out a little bit of the different things happening across the country today in the primaries, a lot of eyes are going to be on Michigan, and in particular, that Democratic primary between Stephen and al-Sayed. What really should Michigan voters be looking out for here?
Yeah, well, in the Democratic primary, you have the choice between a socialist, a Marxist, and a progressive who's painting herself as a moderate. And the choice couldn't be clear between those two and Mike Rogers. I'm the senior advisor for Americans for Prosperity Action, and we've endorsed Mike Rogers in the race. And obviously, he's the better choice for limited government principles and freedoms and opportunities for Michigan families. The other 2 candidates, not so much. If you look at al-Sayed's DSA attachments and his love affair with that organization, he's a socialist. He wants to fundamentally change this country. And you don't fundamentally change things that you love. He wants to have, capitalism, but he wants it to be regulated. He wants Medicare for all. He wants, but ironically, his wife, I believe, is a doctor, and she doesn't take any forms of insurance. She's cash only. So I wonder how that'll work with his new plans. But both he and Haley Stevens want more government control in your life and less freedoms and opportunities for Michigan and American families. And we just can't stand for that. That they are, they're coming at it from different angles on how they want to get to where they're going, but they both end up in the same spot. And that's not what Americans want.
It sounds like there's some balancing here between the ideas of having practical reforms versus having ideological battles within this primary. Is this kind of like a microcosm of what we may see play out in other states across the country with their Democratic Party going between maybe a moderate progressive versus a Democratic socialist?
Yeah, this is, this used to only happen in the blue states, and now it's happening in Michigan. And it will be a bellwether, as it were, and tell what's going to happen in future state elections in the next few days or whatever. And it truly, the Democratic Party is searching for its soul. It's lost its way. And you have some really progressive people in the Haley Stevens camp, but then you have the Democratic Socialists, the Marxists, in the Mamdanis, the El Sayeds, the Bernie Sanders, AOC. They want to fundamentally change this country. They want to get rid of the Supreme Court. They want to change the presidency. They want to get rid of prisons. They want to abolish ICE and law enforcement, not just change it, but they want to get rid of it. And that's just not any of the founding principles that this country was founded on. And again, well, like I said earlier, they want to change how this country operates. And the way this country has operated, three branches of government and so forth, has made us be the strongest, most powerful, most prosperous nation for the last 250 years. And I hate to think what happens if they ever did get control. But I do believe Michigan voters, and we talk to them every single day, are not going to be swayed by the snake oil that Abdul al-Sayed and his camp are selling. They're going to see through that. They're going to see that when those policies, if they ever did enacted, would just steal freedom and opportunity from Michigan families and Michigan businesses. And Mike Rogers' plan for energy abundance from all sources, educational reforms, healthcare reforms are the right path forward for Michigan families to give them, again, more freedom, more opportunity, and more money in their pockets. It's our money. It's not the government's.
Well, Tim, obviously with this primary election, Democrats are going to the polls, and you've got Republicans in other races that are going to be going to the polls for their party. I imagine the conversation about economic freedom versus expanding government, that's going to be a much more thorough conversation in the weeks and the months ahead up into the November election. But just how important is that conversation to AFP and to taxpayers in Michigan and beyond?
It's very important to us. I mean, the cost of living, whether that's energy or groceries, is a problem. It's a thing that's happening. People experience it every day. Our candidates that we endorse in our organization are fundamentally in line with less government intrusion in our lives, less government regulations and red tape. Take energy, for example. Mike Rogers wants to change the way we permit energy production, wants to clear a path so we can have more energy infrastructure built so that we can have energy abundance, again, from all sources. And when people hear Mike's plans, which completely align with our policies in our organization, they do see a clear path towards less government regulations and less cost. You could point to, in Michigan, for example, in November of 23, the Democrat-controlled State House, State Senate, and Governor's Mansion all passed a bill that mandated green energy and carbon neutral things. And in the time since then, we've now have the highest energy costs in the Midwest with the least amount of reliability, and people are paying for this. We point out those democratic solutions, those socialistic solutions, those mandates from the government only increase costs and limit freedom and opportunity for Michigan families. They see the Republicans having a better path forward. And we talk to people every day, and when they see and hear what Mike Rogers wants to bring forth as a U.S. Senator, they're coming on board with his way of thinking. And we talk primarily, again, to swing voters and show them that the conservative Mike Rogers, the principled congressman who will hopefully be the senator soon, has a better path for them in their lives and let them keep more of their hard-earned dollars than the Democrats and the socialists that only want to increase the size and scope of government. We point that out every day.
Yeah, the president recently was in Michigan holding a rally talking about tax policy and tariffs and trying to defend those. But, you've got to also weigh this with the voters heading to the polls. Do you think that Trump is a liability here, and some of the inflationary pressures, the war in the Middle East, is that going to be a weight around the Republicans' necks heading into November?
Those things certainly don't help. And I don't think Trump is necessarily a weight around somebody's neck, although he's not on the ballot, obviously, but his policies and his plans are. If we can get through this Iran conflict and bring down the cost of energy, I think that will help. Certainly, it's not going to help. It's not going to help if it keeps going the way it's going. But again, we always go back to what our policies are, what our candidates that we've endorsed, what their policies and their plans are, and showing Michigan families that those are a better path forward, that the Democrats and the socialists never do anything except for increase the size and scope of government. And our policies don't do that. They give more freedom and opportunity back to Michigan families and Michigan businesses. So we have to talk around that. We have to acknowledge that it is a problem. People aren't, they go to the store, they got to buy bacon and eggs. We want them to be able to buy both, not just one or the other. But if you show the trend of how things have been going, we are in a much better place economically and inflationary wise than we were under the Biden administration. So it's a long-term gain, and there are some short-term pains, but we try to talk people through that and show them that our policies and our plans are the better path forward.
We'll be watching closely what the outcome is in Michigan, especially whether the Democrats there are going to choose to stay with a moderate progressive or go even further left to a Democratic Socialist candidate. And we'll be watching other states as well. Greatly appreciate your time. Tim Golding, Michigan State Director for Americans for Prosperity. We'll be right back with more here from the States. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani is giving wealthy property owners more time to comply with a controversial new tax on second homes in the city, following a backlash over its botched rollout. Welcome back to the States. I'm Greg Bishop. Well, the Mamdani administration announced over the weekend that it's giving about 17,000 residents who may owe that 4% surcharge on 1 to 3 family second homes valued at over $5 million, and co-ops and condos valued at $1 million until September 18th to file an appeal with the city for an exemption. Now, the previous deadline was set for late August, according to the Mamdani administration. Here he is yesterday.
And the point of this period of time is precisely so that New Yorkers, the 17,000 homeowners who received the "you may be subject to" letters, have all the information they need and also have the time to be able to inquire with any questions as well as appeal any assessment of their property as being one that would receive the surcharge. Again, this is a surcharge for secondary homes of non-resident New Yorkers that are worth more than $5 million. We've also made the decision to hire 24 additional civil servants across multiple city agencies precisely to be engaging with New Yorkers on this question. Again, if a New Yorker does not appeal this by September 18th, they still have until March to appeal this to the tax commission before this tax is actually levied.
Now, Mamdani said the new tax, which is expected to drum up $500 million in annual revenue, it'll force part-time New Yorkers to pay their fair share of the city's operating costs. But the Democratic Socialist has been criticized for a confusing rollout of the new tax, including the release of a database of affluent property owners who could be subject to it, which critics say exposes them to harassment and threats. Now, the list required by the new law includes their names, addresses, and other details. And that number of the individuals impacted by this tax, it could grow.
The assessment of 17,000 properties potentially being levied with this surcharge, that is the maximum number of properties. And now the process is on engaging with New Yorkers to see whether those who filed their property in a trust or in an LLC are in fact also primary residence holders of that same property. We have been engaging with a number of New Yorkers. We can have the team follow up with you with the exact number already, just in the time since that first letter was sent. And that engagement will continue through September 18th with the Department of Finance. And again, if a New Yorker does not engage after that point, they can still appeal to the tax commission until March.
Now, the city's Department of Finance, They also muddied the waters a bit by including 900,000 properties on the list without explaining that many of them would not be subject to this new tax. Now, the Real Estate Board of New York, which opposes the tax, said the annual levy will weaken New York City's economy and accelerate an exodus of wealthy households to lower tax states. And while looking to increase the cost of some homeowners to just have a property in New York City, Mamdani was holding an event yesterday where he was looking to address housing affordability.
I think first and foremost, we know that the preeminent crisis in New York City is that of the housing crisis. And we know that the homelessness crisis is one face of that. And what makes today so exciting is that we are building not only housing that currently homeless New Yorkers, as well as those at risk of homelessness, can live in, but that we're accompanying that housing with the kind of services that make it possible for those New Yorkers to transform their own lives. And we are doing this alongside an allocation of more than $5 million in the recent adopted budget, where we are putting money towards a cross-agency task force that is looking to bring vacant supportive housing units online quicker so that we can ensure that we are meeting New Yorkers' needs as quickly as we can.
Now, part of his announcement yesterday at that facility included discussion about subsidizing services for people living in that subsidized housing.
Services including case management, financial literacy classes, paid work training, legal referrals, and more. The other 38 homes will also be rent stabilized and truly affordable for working New Yorkers, with one apartment designated for a live-in super. All residents will have access to free broadband internet across the building, as well as on-site laundry, a fitness center, and community spaces. This project is just one example of our broader efforts to rewrite the relationship between City Hall and the people of the Bronx. Through our historic housing plan, block by block, we are taking a targeted approach to the lasting housing inequities that disproportionately affect those in this borough, holding bad landlords accountable and supporting organized tenants along the way.
But it wasn't just the issues of costs that raised questions yesterday for Mamdani. There were also ongoing concerns about crime in parts of New York City.
I think first and foremost, so long as there is crime in the Bronx and there is crime in New York City, it means that there is work for us to do. And we can acknowledge and appreciate the incredible work of the men and women of the NYPD in reducing crime, and also know that there is still so much more work to be done. And I will tell you, as someone who went to see Kai's body with his family at that viewing, I can never look at the heartbreak that that family is going through and say that the work that we have done is enough. There is always more work to be done, and there always will be more work to be done until every 12-year-old can ride a bike to a bodega and ensure that they're just enjoying summer as every New Yorker has the right to.
Meanwhile, New York's push to unmask federal immigration enforcement agents, it's on hold after a federal judge blocked the provisions of a newly minted state law that restricts local cooperation with immigration crackdowns. In that filing, in the ruling on Monday, a U.S. District Court judge said the Constitution's Supremacy Clause does not permit New York State to regulate federal law enforcement activities, and approved a preliminary injunction blocking New York from enforcing that masking ban. But the Center Square contributor Chris Wade reports that the judge also denied the federal government's request to block New York's ban on 287G agreements between ICE and local law enforcement agencies while the legal challenge plays out in court. New York Governor Kathy Hochul signed the Local Cops, Local Crimes Act in May that bans state and local law enforcement agencies from helping the federal government in civil immigration enforcement cases, and bans ICE agents from wearing masks during operations. In June, the Department of Justice filed their lawsuit against New York State, challenging the constitutionality of the new law, which lawyers for the DOJ said would make ICE agents and other federal authorities subject to criminal penalties for wearing masks to protect their identities. New York responded by filing a counter lawsuit seeking to uphold those new restrictions on immigration enforcement. And be sure to get the latest at thecentersquare.com by signing up for the newsletter free at the Center Square. We'll be right back with more from the States. 31 states opting into the Federal Education Freedom Scholarship Program, while 19 states and Washington, D.C. have not done so. All of this ahead of that January 2027 deadline. Welcome back to the States. I'm Greg Bishop. The Trump administration launched the School Choice Initiative in 2025 through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And it created a federal income tax credit of up to $1,700 annually for individuals who donate to certified scholarship granting organizations. Now, joining us to discuss who's in and who's out is the Center Square education reporter, Esther Wickham. Esther, thanks for taking time. Clearly, we've got a few more months before people, are going to be able to see this benefit and their kids in these states that are taking part in this. But what exactly is happening here? What's the deadline, and could more states possibly still join?
Yeah, thanks, Greg, for having me. So this has definitely been a hot button issue for the past year or so, with more states opting in and school choice essentially becoming a huge bipartisan issue. We've seen a lot of Democratic leaders and Republican leaders both opting in for this federal education tax credit that the Trump administration has initiated. And it's interesting to see the dichotomy between these two kind of sides in supporting school choice and kind of providing more flexibility, as supporters say, for families and for students when it comes to education. And as you see, I mean, currently there is 30 states that have officially opted in, but I put 31 because the governor, Kathy Hochul in New York, has stated that she does intend to opt in to school choice, but I think that she just wants the IRS to place a little bit more regulation on the tax credit. But we see these other 19 states and the District of Columbia still hesitant, and many states within that 19 number have made it clear that they're not planning to opt in anytime soon for worry about accountability or regulation issue. And so up until January of 2027 of next year, we are potentially going to see maybe more states opt in, but this is the number at the current moment.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, some states have kind of been on the fence a little bit. I know in Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker has said he's waiting to see what the rules look like before he officially jumps in. But there have been other states that have explicitly said they want no part in this. What's the rationale that you've seen them provide for not wanting to take part in this school choice program?
Yeah, so the main states that have kind of completely rejected this federal tax credit for school choice has been states like Hawaii, New Mexico, Oregon, and essentially their main argument is they don't think that this kind of federal tax credit really holds the federal government accountable. Big push that we've seen from the Trump administration is federalism, giving more control back to the states. And they kind of argue they don't think that this federal tax credit program essentially does that. And similar to what we've seen Governor J.B. Pritzker and even Governor Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania has said, is they're weary about the regulations. We don't really know what's going on when it comes to the details or the practical application of this program. And so I think that's why a lot of states have been stalling. Maybe they, at the end of the day, won't opt in, but other states have kind of made it clear we're not going to opt in simply because we just don't know enough, and we would rather have our own, education savings account vouchers within our state to kind of push that idea of school choice than on a federal level.
Yeah, as you report, 4 states announcing they will not participate in this program: Hawaii, Minnesota, New Mexico, and Oregon. But also, as you said, a lot of other states still kind of on the fence. We could see them pop in here. But one state in particular, kind of interesting, Illinois. They did have a much more generous school choice tax credit program in place for about 5 or 6 years. And I think that the political battle we saw in the state of Illinois probably is something that is instructive to what the conversation on this issue is across the entire country. And that was teacher unions. They did not like the idea of school choice scholarships. They claimed that it was taking away tax dollars from public schools. But Esther, you're understanding that's not the case with this, right? These are private dollars going into scholarship granting organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a big push, I think, for a lot of states too, as to why they haven't opted in is because of teacher unions. Their big fear is that these taxpayer dollars, this public funding is going to go away from the public school system. But as I said before, this is a choice for states to opt in. And at the end of the day, it really looks at, where is this funding actually going towards? And I think that's why the Trump administration initiated this program, because it clearly is going to streamline from these SGOs, these scholarship granting organizations, directly to individuals when it comes to tuition prices, educational services, curriculum. This is funding that is hand in hand helping those that are in this country, especially K through 12 students. And what we've seen happen in the public school system when it comes to as many education experts have said, there's this administrative bloat happening. There's a lot of funding going into the public school system, but still, Greg, on a national level, we're at 30% proficiency, with 70% of our students not proficient in math, reading, and writing. And so this is the Trump administration's kind of push to alleviate that kind of cost. And as many supporters have said, kind of place competition back into the education system with this school choice program.
Yeah, and some argue that, the public education system is kind of like a monopoly. There is no other choice, but this is offering up that choice for families to tap into those scholarship granting organizations and get some funds that could assist in having a school for their choice to get their kids into a school that may be performing better, be it a private school versus the public option there. But as you report, some of the benefits from this being postulated in a state like Colorado, what was some of the reporting out of there?
Yeah, so among many other states, but just giving one example, in the state of Colorado, this opting into the tax credit program, it could potentially generate between $164 million and $493 million annually, which on top of that creates jobs and expands access to school choice for tens of thousands of students. Because if you really think about it, you place students, set them up for success when it comes to education, which potentially allows them to get a great education or just get a really great job after graduating high school, and they're proficient in education, and so they can succeed. And they then become taxpayers and can contribute to the economy. And we see in Colorado that's already being successful there. And so I think that's a big push that we've seen for other states to opt in, because it's not only the here and now, what our students are doing now, but what's going to happen in the future as they become adults and then taxpayers.
It'll be interesting to see if any other states have their concerns alleviated heading into the end of this year, as we see the vast majority of the country opting into this program to help provide some private dollars to scholarship granting organizations to then allow for those making those private donations to get a tax credit and help somebody and a family with school choice. Esther Wickham, education reporter for the Center Square. Always appreciate your time, and we'll definitely check back in on this and other education stories here with the States. We'll be right back with more.
Congress should end legal abuse of federal welfare programs by eliminating broad-based categorical eligibility, which allows individuals to automatically qualify for benefits based on something as trivial as receiving a brochure. The Department of Agriculture estimated that this loophole allowed 5.6 million individuals who were not eligible under federal standards to nonetheless receive SNAP benefits. The No Welfare for the Wealthy Act of 2025 would reduce this abuse by requiring households to meet federal standards for SNAP benefits.
That was Advancing American Freedom's Rachel Gressler telling Congress back in June to do more to control wasteful spending within the nation's taxpayer-subsidized safety net programs. Some attorneys general from across the country, they're now saying in federal court that the federal government is going too far with food subsidies. Welcome back to the States. I'm Greg Bishop. New York Attorney General Letitia James leading a group of Democrats across the country suing the Trump administration over a requirement to turn over personal information about Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program recipients. Now, that lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court yesterday. James and 20 other attorneys general argue that the Department of Agriculture's recent guidance declaring that some immigrants, including refugees and those granted asylum, are ineligible for SNAP is illegal. Now, the Center Square contributor Chris Wade reports that the AGs asked a judge to block the enforcement of the policy. In the 60-page complaint, the Democrats said the USDA's new policy requiring non-citizens to have lived in the country for 5 years to receive SNAP benefits means that anyone entering the country, including those admitted through humanitarian protection programs for asylum seekers and refugees, would automatically be ineligible for temporary food assistance. The USDA's push to enforce the new rules, it also, quote, threatens to destabilize SNAP nationwide, according to the lawsuit, and it puts a significant financial strain on states that would have to shoulder the cost for fines from violations. Now, the AGs pointed out that the Trump administration has been blocked by recent federal court rulings from assessing personal information of welfare recipients to probe for immigration violations. Back in October, the USDA issued new guidance to states curtailing SNAP eligibility for non-citizens as it implemented spending cuts and expanded work requirements approved by the president's One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Now, concerns about this were recently heard in California during a Senate committee where people raised the possibility of more people being taken off of food subsidies.
And 36% of these humanitarian immigrants that started losing their benefits on April 1st, 36% are children. And we all know that once you lose food assistance, you don't have the support, stability, guidance. You end up in hospitals, emergency rooms, child welfare cases. And while food banks are a vital source, they cannot fill the gap that HR 1 is causing. And I truly believe that with proper assistance in place, people can truly thrive, not just survive.
Now, the Trump administration has threatened to withhold food aid from recipients in most Democratic-controlled states unless those states provide information about the recipients. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins said at the time that the agency wants to be making sure that those who are really needing the food assistance are getting that food assistance, and to also ensure that the American taxpayer is protected. She had cited data showing that 186,000 deceased people are receiving SNAP benefits, and another 500,000 have been getting doubled benefits. Now, in 2025, roughly 42 million people received food stamps to help pay for their groceries, or about 1 in 8 Americans. According to the USDA, that is more than $101 billion in cost to the taxpayer. Now, as of April, that number of people getting the benefit dropped to about 37 million, according to the agency. But watchdogs say more needs to be done to rein in taxpayer spending on safety net programs because there's potential abuse. Here's Jessica Vaughn, Director of Policy Studies for the Center for Immigration Studies, testifying to the U.S. Senate in March.
Besides blocking law enforcement agencies from cooperating with ICE, Sanctuary states typically have other policies that attract illegal settlement and thus burden taxpayers with support of illegal immigrants. Besides funding emergency health care and schooling for all, a number of sanctuary states go farther and choose to provide Medicaid, subsidized health insurance, nutrition assistance, housing, and much more. Illegal immigrants use these welfare programs in large numbers. My organization has found that over 60% of illegal alien-headed households are using at least one form of welfare program, and usually more than one, at a cost of tens of billions of dollars to taxpayers. This is why any resources spent on immigration enforcement actually save taxpayer money in the long run.
Now, other states that have signed on to that lawsuit filed Monday against the Trump administration includes California, Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Vermont, Washington, and Wisconsin. Now, New York's Letitia James, a Democrat, has sued the Trump administration more than 74 times, claiming the Trump administration is illegally cutting off SNAP benefits for tens of thousands of lawful permanent residents. We'll be tracking that case and many others closely here with the Center Square. We'll be right back with more from the states. Welcome back to the States. It's now time for America's Talking, with headlines from across the country that you can find in the description below or in your inbox with the Center Square newsletter, free at thecentersquare.com. Well, the Michigan Supreme Court was nearly unanimous in overturning the key permit for the construction of Enbridge's proposed Line 5 tunnel beneath the Straits of Mackinac. The Center Square reporter, Elise Apel, reports the court orders state energy regulators to reconsider their environmental review for the project, which environmental groups and Native American tribes have been fighting against since it was first proposed in 2018. Now, the plaintiffs, they applauded the decision. Enbridge spokesperson Ryan Duffy shared the company's statements on the decision to the Center Square. They said they disagree with the court's decision and are disappointed at the additional delay that remand will cause the project to have. It's already been under review for close to a decade. And they further said that Enbridge is reviewing the opinion and assessing their other legal options. This is the latest setback for that controversial project, which has faced years of legal challenges and regulatory delays. It also comes just weeks after a significant win for the project, when Michigan regulators approved key permits for the tunnel. Following the recent passage of Chicago Public Schools' nearly $10 billion budget, state leaders and lawmakers, they have mixed reaction to the board's inclusion of an unguaranteed $435 million in taxpayer funding. Now, after hours of deliberation, board members voted on the budget, and the deadline was the same day that they passed that budget, which initially relied on an assumed $285 million in the form of surplus funds from the city's tax increment financing districts. Now, the final version included an amendment from board members aligned with the Chicago Teachers Union, which agreed that the state of Illinois taxpayers should provide the district with an additional $150 million to assist in covering the district's deficit. Now, Illinois House Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch told members of the CTU the day before that the board's votes meant he's committed to putting forward legislation to give Chicago Public Schools more state funds, but he didn't mention how much he thought the state could actually provide. Now, Governor J.B. Pritzker said he doesn't want to raise taxes, regardless of if the legislature were to move forward with a plan to give CPS funds that they assumed in their budget. Here's the governor.
I would like to find, always looking for more funding for education, but I also believe that we want to make sure that we're balancing the budget while we're attempting to either reprioritize. I'm not going to raise taxes on working families. That is a principle I will not breach. But I think that, there are perhaps other things that the Speaker has in mind. I think we have to wait to see what his plan is.
Meanwhile, Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrill is rejecting Pornhub's call to reconsider the state's age verification law, saying her office intends to increase scrutiny on the company instead. Now, Murrill said in a statement, quote, "Not only will they not reconsider age verification for Pornhub's websites, but they're going to pursue even more accountability." The Center Square Louisiana reporter Nolan McKendry reports the Attorney General did not elaborate on what additional accountability could involve. Pornhub appealed to Murrill, Governor Jeff Landry, and Representative Lori Schlegel, this law's sponsor in the state of Louisiana, with a letter arguing that Louisiana's website-by-website approach has failed to keep minors away from obscene content and instead steered users towards sites that ignore the law. The company said searches conducted June 4th found that 8 of the first 10 results for free porn on Google, Bing, and DuckDuckGo led the websites without age verification, 24 of 30 results across 3 search engines. And residents in Lake City, Florida, they will not be able to vote on whether they agree with the police department's use of flock security cameras. And this, of course, was something they were looking to put on the ballot as a non-binding resolution. Now, that resolution under consideration during last night's meeting, it would have placed a non-binding referendum up for voters to consider whether or not the use of AI-powered license plate readers and vehicular data collection cameras, known as flock cameras, were necessary. Councilmember James Carter, who was one of the 2 who voted in favor of putting the question on the ballot for voters, said it would not have automatically changed any policies or rules, but it would have essentially have just acted as a public opinion poll. Now, Carter's take clashed with other members who said that the cameras are necessary for public safety. Flock camera technology has come under fire for instances of misuse. An example of that in Sumter County, Sheriff Patrick Breeden suspended the use of flock cameras and called for a complete internal audit of all the databases after the department discovered one of its detectives had abused the flock database to gain information about her husband's ex-wife. And that's just some of what America is talking about. Get these and other headlines at thecentersquare.com. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop, and join us back here Wednesday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from all across the country, only with The States, powered by the Center Square.